Well, let's jump to another clip, and this is where we're going to get into more of that philosophical kind of Jacques Derrida, worldview. And in all candor, Tim Whitaker has gone back and done another longer video, kind of flushing out some of this criticism. And spoiler alert, he didn't necessarily change anything. He just kind of added more words and put some clips of Alisa in that longer video. So I think this will be a great opportunity to kind of unpack some of that. I've done some research, was thinking about doing a response video to that, but I'd love to get your insight on this next clip. Sure. So let's turn to that.
I'll just give you an example of this. So they talk about in the book how one of the problems with deconstruction in the philosophical tense, in the philosophical sense, is that Jacques Derrida, kind of like the modern father of deconstruction, says, according to them in their book, that words have no singular meaning, and for them that's a problem, and it's tied to postmodernism and relativism. But then they go on to redefine the word deconstruction for their audience. And I thought to myself, well, you're actually doing what we all do and what Derrida is talking about, where words don't have one singular meaning. Words change meaning over time, and that's normal. And then you're also doing that in this book, which only further demonstrates that you're participating in the process that you think is so problematic. So I don't know if they recognize that, but yeah, when you redefine deconstruction, you kind of prove Derrida's point that the word deconstruction doesn't have one singular meaning. That's okay.
Whew. Okay. Like I said, I have some thoughts on this, but I'll let you jump in first and kind of talk about, does Whitaker have a point here?
Yeah, and I want to hear your thoughts too. No, we didn't just prove Derrida's point. In fact, I don't think Tim even understands Derrida. Alisa and I are attempting to accurately describe what deconstruction is out there in the world. Okay, we're looking at what's going on in the deconstruction movement, and we're asking ourselves, what is deconstruction? We're not just sitting back in our offices and dreaming up a definition of deconstruction. We're trying to describe the world like a scientist looking at gravity, and they're saying, what is that? They're not inventing gravity. They're trying to describe it. In a similar way, we're observing what's going on. And by the way, I'll come back to this. They seem to have a problem with our definition, a postmodern process of rethinking your faith without requiring scripture as a standard. So far, Tim has rejected scripture as a standard, and I believe Tom has too. I mean, I haven't read his book, but my understanding is that's not even in question. So check, okay? Do they believe in a postmodern process? Well, it seems like, although I don't think he understands what it is, he seems to be checking that box too, okay? So what is the problem then with the definition we've offered? Because we're describing literally what you seem to be advocating for. Okay, so that's part of it. What is deconstruction? We aren't looking within. That's a postmodern approach. What we're doing is looking out there. We're looking at reality and trying to describe what's going on. Okay, that's why in our book, we cite the deconstructionists. We provide the receipts. We make the case. We're giving evidence. None of that is necessary if we're just doing what Derrida did. So no, we're not just redefining deconstruction to mean whatever Alisa and Tim really like. No, instead, we're trying to accurately describe faith deconstruction as it's being lived out today. That's not postmodern. That's not postmodern. Now, here is something I really want to hit on, and Tim, you probably saw this too. Derrida wasn't merely saying that words can have multiple meanings or that words can change their meanings over time. If that's what you think Derrida was doing, you do not understand postmodernism. Okay, I can pull up on my computer here and pick a word and find that, hey, that word has multiple meanings. That's not postmodern, okay? There are definitions that correspond, and yes, words back can mean different things, right? My back versus, the back of the room or whatever, okay? So take the word, for example. No one disputes that the word gay used to mean happy, primarily, and now when you use the word, typically you're referring to someone who's same-sex attracted. Okay, that word has changed its meaning. But that's not what Derrida is talking about. Derrida claimed that words have no objective meanings that would make one's interpretation of that word either objectively true or false. Okay, so what I would recommend Tim do is read The Postcard by Derrida, okay, where he describes that any written text is like a letter that never arrives at its destination. Okay, so when you write something down and give it meaning, it never actually arrives. Okay, like the meaning never arrives because you can import. There is no objective meaning. Near the end of his book, What Would Jesus Deconstruct? John Caputo, he applies actually this idea to Paul's writing about homosexual behavior. And here's what he says. He says, first he affirms that Paul would condemn what today we call homosexuality. And it even goes even farther. He says, and if you were to ask Jesus about it, he would have said the same thing as Paul. That's what Caputo says. However, since authors' meanings have no more authority than the hearer's interpretation, remember, that's James Lindsay, the author's intended meaning and the hearer's interpretation, no one has more authority. What you can do is simply deconstruct Paul and Jesus and reconstruct a contrary interpretation. In fact, that's exactly what Caputo does when you read his book. He says that if Jesus were alive today, Jesus is alive today, but he says, that's how he puts it. If Jesus were alive today, he would be familiar with the pros and the cons of the contemporary argument over sexuality, and he would side with pro-gay theology. Voila. There you go. That's all you have to do. You import a new subjective meaning because there is no objective meaning anyway. I just want to warn people, this is a very dangerous thing, not just to put words in God's mouth, but actually remove words from God's mouth. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's what goes on when you say those words. You know, we talked about Jesus early on, right? He said, have you not read what Jesus commanded or what God commanded? Here's what Moses says.
Right.
What they want to do is take those words out of God's mouth, so to speak, and replace them with, well, here's what I think. And that's the postmodern prose. That's what postmodernists are doing. Not just, well, words have different meanings today than they did before. That's not the same thing.
Excellent. I'm not sure there's too much I can add, but I think the sounds that come out of our mouth, if those things are referring to something that is outside of our mouth, like if I call this a microphone, the word that I use, whether I'm speaking Spanish and I don't speak Spanish, or whether I'm speaking Russian or ancient Greek or ancient Hebrew, if I'm referring to something that's outside, it doesn't matter the sound that we make in order to be able to refer to the thing outside. It is the thing outside. And that is oftentimes what Scripture is doing. They're referring to the truths outside of themselves, but they're using sounds to be able to do it. And that's similar to what you guys are doing. What Derrida is trying to do is he's trying to destabilize institutions that have long been in power and that have long-standing roots in our culture. And so one of the ways that he's doing that is to disrupt the outsideness of our words. He's saying, no. Those things that are trying to convey, long-standing meaning over generations is actually not really there at all, because the meanings have changed and we can't really know what's going on, back to that epistemology ontology thing that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, I think there's a lot there. And I love that you use the example of gay, because that is actually the example that Tim uses in his response video to Alisa. So that was a direct response, and I think that is fantastic. So we'll keep going here. Hopefully we can wrap up these last few clips.